All right, so MiniMax M3 just dropped as a live 428 billion parameter model with a 1 million token context window, and Gemini 3.5 Pro is sitting in enterprise preview promising 2 million tokens. Two very different situations. And I wanted to find out what the data actually says. This is July 2026, and the model you pick right now could seriously affect your workflow costs and what you can actually ship. I'm comparing these two across 4 real tests, pulling from 15 verified sources with 0 vendor spin, filling in the gaps. And honestly, the result kind of surprised me, because one of these models has 0 published pricing and 0 published coding scores, and yet the final verdict is way more complicated than just picking the one that actually exists right now. So this comparison is for developers and teams who need a frontier class long context model and have to make a real call right now. Pick wrong and you're either burning money on a model that can't handle your document size, or you're waiting on a release that keeps slipping while your project stalls. That's the actual cost here. Test 1 is long context window. And when this goes wrong, it goes wrong in a really painful way. You feed in a 200-page document, the model drops chunks past a certain token limit, and you don't even know it happened until you get a summary that's just wrong. That's the failure mode we're checking for here. What I found here is genuinely interesting. MiniMax M3 is live right now with a verified 1 million token window, 512,000 guaranteed minimum, accessible through the public API today. Gemini 3.5 Pro has announced 2 million tokens, but it's locked in enterprise preview as of July 2026. So on screen, you're seeing one live number and one announced number. And those are not the same thing. Now, before I call anything here, take this with a grain of salt. Gemini 3.1 Pro's 2 million token window degraded past 500,000 tokens in community tests. And 3.5 Pro promises architectural improvements, but has no independent verification yet. MiniMax's reliability figures are also vendor reported, so neither side has clean independent data and maximum context. I was expecting MiniMax to take this clean because it's actually available, but the honest call is a tie. You can't compare a live 1 million token window against a 2 million token promise that nobody outside enterprise preview has touched. So we're sitting at 0 wins each, 1 tied, and the scoreboard stays flat after test 1. Test 2 is API pricing. And this one hits you in the budget fast. You spin up a long context agent, run it for a week, and then the invoice lands, and you realize you had no idea what the per token rate actually was. With frontier models, that surprise can be hundreds of thousands of dollars you didn't plan for. So here's what I looked at. MiniMax M3 has verified promotional pricing at 30 cents per million input tokens and $1.20 per million output tokens, with a 60% off rate through Open Router at 24 cents input. Gemini 3.5 Pro, no official pricing published as of July 2026. What you see on screen for Gemini is literally a blank, and that's not me being lazy. That's the actual situation. And yeah, I want to be upfront about something. MiniMax's pricing gauge actually shifted during the launch window, so even the numbers I just gave you are promotional and could change. Any Gemini 3.5 Pro pricing figures you've seen floating around online are community estimates, not Google confirmed. A real cost comparison is just not possible right now. Honestly, I was expecting to hand MiniMax this one easily because they have real published numbers and Gemini has nothing, but calling it a win on one-sided data felt wrong. So this is another tie that puts us at 0 wins for either side, 2 tests tied total, and the scoreboard is still completely flat. Test 3 is multimodal input processing. When this goes wrong, your pipeline stalls. You're trying to feed a model video frames or images alongside a long text prompt. And if the model can't handle it natively, you end up pre-processing everything yourself, which adds latency and cost before the model even sees the input. What surprised me here is how one-sided the data is. MiniMax M3 has vendor-reported numbers. 9 times faster prefill and 15 times faster decode versus its prior generation at 1 million token context, plus native text, image, and video support trained from step 0. Gemini 3.5 Pro has no published speed data, and modality support beyond text and images is unconfirmed. So on screen, you're seeing real numbers on one side and question marks on the other. Now, I want to be clear about something. Those MiniMax speed figures are all vendor reported on internal NVIDIA infrastructure and haven't been independently replicated. They're relative improvements against a prior generation, not absolute tokens per second numbers you can compare to anything else. So take those 9 times and 15 times claims as directional, not as a clean benchmark you can hold to. I really thought MiniMax would take this one, given how much speed data they put out. But with no independent replication and nothing published from Gemini to compare against, it's still a tie. We're now at 0 wins each, 3 tests tied, and I'm starting to see a pattern that's going to matter a lot in the final verdict. Test 4 is coding task completion, and this one matters in a very concrete way. If you're running an agentic coding workflow and the model fails on a real software engineering task, you don't just get a bad answer, you get broken code that ships, or a debugging session that costs you hours and burns tokens on top of that. So I looked at what's actually published. MiniMax M3 has vendor reported scores. SWE Bench Pro at 59%, Terminal Bench 2.1 at 66%, MCP Atlas at 74.2%, all on screen now. But every single one of those was run by MiniMax on MiniMax infrastructure using Claude Code scaffolding. Gemini 3.5 Pro has 0 published coding scores as of late June 2022. So there's nothing to compare against. And this is where I'd really pump the brakes. Self-reported benchmarks on internal infrastructure are kind of like a restaurant grading its own food. And the Claude Code scaffolding caveat applies to every single MiniMax coding number, which means the scaffold is doing some of the work. You want independent third-party results before you trust these scores for production decisions. Okay, so going in, I figured MiniMax would at least get credit for having numbers, but awarding a win on one-sided self-reported data isn't honest. This is a tie again, and that wraps all 4 tests at 0 wins each for tied total, which is kind of wild and completely changes how you have to read the final verdict. So here's where MiniMax M3 wins outright. It's available right now on the public API through Open Router and Together AI at a verified promotional rate of 30 cents per million input tokens. It natively supports text, image, and video from pre-training, and it has at least directional coding scores on the board, which is more than Gemini 3.5 Pro has published. And here's where Gemini 3.5 Pro has a real edge. The announced 2 million token context window is double what MiniMax offers. And if Google delivers quality across that full range, it's a genuine advantage for massive document workloads. Plus, Vertex AI Enterprise integration gives Gemini a compliance and support story that MiniMax simply can't match for regulated industries. Honestly, I came in expecting a clear winner and got a comparison where neither model can be properly scored against the other yet. So here's the decision rule. If you need a frontier long context model today with real pricing and confirmed multimodal support, MiniMax M3 is your only actual option. If you're in a regulated industry, or you can wait and you need the largest possible context window with Google's enterprise backing, hold out for Gemini 3.5 Pro to ship.